In this video, we'll be looking at the top 10 worst spell ruler cards to be released. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see some future videos. So the number 10 spot on this list goes to Manga Ryuran. Manga Ryuran is one of 4 Toon monsters to be released during the Spell Ruler era, the others being Blue Eyes Toon Dragon, Toon Summon Skull, and Toon Mermaid. So none of these 4 Toons are actually good cards anymore, with the only one that actually has some play still would be Toon Mermaid, because these 4 cards are special summons, they just require tributes for the special summons depending on their level. So a card like Toon Mermaid can special summon itself from the hand easily and then be tributed or used for something. Blue Eyes Toon Dragon at least has good stats for a 2 tribute monster. It's still not worth it, but at least its stats are good. Whereas Toon Summon Skull has good stats for a 1 tribute monster. Manga Ryuran, however, is the worst of these 4 cards because it only has a measly 2200 attack for its 2 tributes required. This makes Manga Ryuran the worst of these 4 Toons, and that's why it found itself on this list. Number 9 on this list goes to Wall Shadow. Wall Shadow is a monster with 1600 attack and 3000 defense, but it says that it cannot be normal summon or set, and it must first be special summoned by using Magical Labyrinth. So if you take a look at these stats, for a monster that must be special summoned with another specific card, as you can see, its attack is horrible, which means every time you summon this card, you essentially want to use it for its defense of 3000 and special summon it in defense mode, right? After all, if you wanted a high attack monster, why not just summon like really any other vanilla 1800 attacker as opposed to this card, right? But here's the thing, Magical Labyrinth says it can only be equipped to a Labyrinth Wall, and you can tribute the equipped monster, meaning Labyrinth Wall, to special summon a Wall Shadow from specifically your deck. But Labyrinth Wall already has 3000 defense, which means in most cases you would essentially tribute set the card or special summon it in defense mode if you want that 3000 defense. Granted, Labyrinth Wall isn't a very good card, it's actually a pretty bad card, but it's a lot better than Wall Shadow because it's a lot easier to get on the field. Wall Shadow is just an extra step towards not really improving your field for any reason aside from transforming your monster into one that also has 1600 attack, which by that point, just summon a monster with high attack, enough said. Number 8 on this list goes to Kodamato. This one is a monster with 0 attack and 1600 defense and has a very odd effect that really is not all that great in combination with its horrible stats, especially its attack. What's interesting about this card is that when it first came out, it was such a confusing effect that Konami didn't really translate it well into what the effect actually meant, that people were actually misplaying it the entire time. Essentially, the first copies of this card that were released would basically say that monsters cannot exist on the field if they have the same name. By reading that statement worded that way, you would think that if there's already a monster out on the field, you can't summon another monster of the same name. That's actually not true. Eventually, the wording was changed so it could clarify things a little bit, and depending on when monsters are summoned with the same name or if they're summoned together, either the new monster is destroyed or they're both summoned at the same time. But monsters can still be summoned, regardless if they have the same name, they'll just be destroyed right away. Despite all this, the card was never really any good. It was pretty bad in so many ways. Non-existent attack stat in combination with it being a fairy earth, which is very odd, with a very mediocre effect, makes it on this list. Number 7 belongs to Snake Fang. Snake Fang is a normal trap card that says, decrease one selected monster's defense by 500 points during the turn this card is activated. So on paper, this effect looks okay, right? However, if you look into this quicker and compare it to other cards, it's actually really horrible. On the same exact set being Spell Ruler, a few other cards came out known as Rush Recklessly and the Reliable Guardian. Both of these cards are quick play spell cards that either increase a monster's attack or defense by 700, attack for Rush Recklessly, and defense for the Reliable Guardian. So if you use Snake Fang, one would assume that you're using it on the opponent's monster because it's a decreasing card, meaning it decreases the target's defense by 500. But by that point, why not just use Rush Recklessly? Rush Recklessly gives your monster 700 attack points, and it's a quick play spell card which makes it a lot more flexible, meaning you can use it right when you draw it, or you can set it and use it on the opponent's turn. Snake Fang doesn't let you do that. Snake Fang, being a trap card, will only let you use it starting from your opponent's next turn, and it's 200 points less effective than Rush Recklessly. Even when compared to slightly older cards, such as Reinforcements and Castle Walls, which are essentially weaker versions of the Reliable Guardian and Rush Recklessly, technically speaking, even those cards are better than Snake Fang, because with those cards you get to increase a monster's attack, and in many cases it's essentially a little bit better to increase your own attack by 500 by using Reinforcements, as opposed to decreasing an opponent's monster by 500 points. For all of these reasons, Snake Fang found itself on this list because it's just that bad of a card. Number 6 on this list goes to Jigen Bakugan, a Fire Pyro level 2 monster with 200 attack and 1000 defense. So aside from its already pretty bad stats, it has an effect which is not that great. It's a flip effect, which basically says that after this card is flipped, you can offer it as a tribute during your standby phase to destroy all of your monsters and inflict damage equal to half of the total attack of the destroyed cards, excluding itself. This card is just so bad in so many ways because first of all, it has to be flipped and then you need to offer it as a tribute during your standby phase, which means if your opponent attacks into it and destroys it, you can't use the effect. So you have to somehow set this card and hope that your opponent attacks with a monster with 1000 attack or less and doesn't destroy it, or you would have to set it on your turn and then somehow have your opponent not attack you for 2 turns in a row to give you enough time to flip it and then do it on your next standby phase. You can also use other cards of course like Desert Sunlight to quicken the process, but by that point is it really worth it to blow up all your monsters and inflict damage to your opponent equal to half of the total attack? If this card didn't say equal to half and instead the total combined attack, it still wouldn't be that great. The burn damage would be amazing in that case, but to trigger it would still take way too long and it would effectively never happen. The opponent would just get rid of the card before you could do anything. And so because of all these reasons, Jigen Bakugan is just a really bad card and that's why it's number 6. Number 5 on this list goes to Queen Bird. If you take a look at Queen Bird, it has stats of a level 4 monster, but it's a level 5 monster itself. With 1200 attack and 2000 defense, you know what other card has identical stats but came out 2 sets before? Aquamador. You know one other card that actually has better stats but is a level 3? Giant Soldier of Stone. Well, these cards are obviously not good anymore today because they're simply just plain vanillas with mediocre stats. They're at least playable and much better than Queen Bird. Queen Bird is just a definition of a garbage card, and it came out 2 sets after the first one, which produced cards like Giant Soldier of Stone and Aquamador. When making this list, I was debating among this card and a few others such as Giant Turtle who feeds on flames because they're all equally as bad. Giant Turtle has 200 more attack but 200 less defense and also a level 5, which means it's just as bad. However, I decided to go with Queen Bird because I could at least compare it to some monsters that had either equal or even better stats than this card, and they came out 2 sets before this one. The number 4 spot goes to Slot Machine. Slot Machine is a level 7 monster with 2000 attack and 2300 defense. There's actually a lot of level 7 plus monsters in this booster pack, and they almost all have pretty bad stats. A few others, for example, include Hyozan Ryu, Ryuran, and Serpent Knight Dragon, all of which are really bad monsters for their level. But those monsters at least have slightly better stats than Slot Machine. Slot Machine only has 2000 attack, whereas the other ones have at least a little bit more. All these cards are just downright awful, absolutely terrible. But if I had to pick one of these level 7 or higher 2 tribute monsters, it would definitely be Slot Machine. Number 3 on this list goes to Performance of Sword. So Spell Ruler was actually the first set to introduce ritual monsters, and this set specifically introduced 4 of them, being Performance of Sword, Hungry Burger, Crab Turtle, and Relinquished. Out of these 4 monsters, it's fairly obvious which one of these 4 actually was pretty viable, whereas the other 3 were pretty garbage right from the start. From the 3 garbage ones though, Performance of Sword has the worst stats, with 50 less attack points in second place Hungry Burger. Crab Turtle does have a lot more attack than both of these, but it's also a level 8 monster, which means that you have to actually offer more to summon it. Because for ritual monsters to be summoned, you have to sacrifice enough levels of monsters to either equal or go beyond the level of the ritual monster. I also didn't want to make the video too boring by basically going back to back to back in terms of really bad cards by putting these 3 in a row, so I decided to just pick the one worst ritual monster and just kinda honorable mention the other few ones. Which means Hungry Burger and Crab Turtle, in addition to the ritual spell cards, are actually safe from this list, for obvious reasons. The number 2 spot goes to Boer Soldier. Boer Soldier is an Earth level 4 Beast Warrior monster with 2000 attack and 500 defense. It honestly has one of the worst effects I've ever seen in my entire life when it comes to level 4 or lower monsters with high attack. Basically, this card can only be summoned by a flip summon. If you normal summon it, it's destroyed. That's already really bad. In addition, if your opponent has 1 or more monsters under their control, the attack of this card is decreased by 1000, essentially making this a 1000 attack monster. The effect is just so bad that this card was overlooked immediately. Other cards with really high attacks when they first came out, such as Jirai Gumo or Dark Elf, actually had at least a slight amount of play, because they weren't awful. For example, Jirai Gumo, despite having a really bad attacking effect, you could at least summon Jirai Gumo and keep it on the field with 2200 attack, and your opponent would actually have a difficult time running over that monster. Dark Elf has a similar manner. You can just summon it and keep it there if you don't want to keep paying your life points to attack. For Boer Soldier though, in order to get this card to just at least be there, with 2000 attack, you have to wait a turn by flip summoning it, hoping it doesn't get destroyed, and then your opponent needs to not control any monsters. Which means if they summon any monster with at least 1050 attack, Boer Soldier is destroyed, because that card will destroy Boer Soldier by battle. So that's why this card gets the number 2 spot on the list. And finally, the number 1 worst card in Spell Ruler is Darkness Approaches. Darkness Approaches is a normal spell card that says discard 2 cards from your hand, select 1 face-up monster and change it to face-down defense position. This card is just so bad in so many ways, it almost never saw play even right when it came out. It was however always in so many conversations because of back then its very unique like effect. Essentially this card got errated once Link monsters actually came out. But before that, the effect before the errata still had the same cost of discarding 2 cards, and then you would still target 1 face-up monster, and you would change it face down. However, the card specifically specified to not change the battle position. This was essentially the only way to get a face-down attack position monster ever. However, with all these crazy rulings and stuff, with Link monsters not being able to go into defense mode, it was just a little too crazy, and Konami decided to errata the card, and to basically always changing it into face-down defense position. Regardless though, it's a really bad card, because there were other cards that actually came out simply a few sets after this one, such as Book of Moon, which is a much better card. Book of Moon has no cost of discarding 2 cards from your hand, and you simply still target a face-up monster and change it to face-down defense position. In addition, it's also a quick play spell card. That card is way better than this card in so many ways, which is why it's actually been on the ban list for the longest time now. This card though is way too horrible, essentially making you go -3 just to change the position of a face-up monster on the field to face-down defense position. It's just so bad, and that's why this card gets the number 1 spot on this list. Alright, so that's it. That is the top 10 worst cards of Spell Ruler to be released. As always, leave a like, leave a comment on anything you want, whether you agree with this list, other recommendations, and other recommendations for other videos as well. And as always, make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already, because it does in fact help both parties out. So hopefully I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye everyone, have a great and of course a fantastic day.